What happens when destruction exceeds the limits that human civilization had previously understood? For most of history, war remained terrible, but still recognizable. Cities were burned, empires collapsed, entire populations suffered famine, massacre, displacement, and disease. Violence could reach enormous scale long before the modern age. Yet even the most devastating wars unfolded within boundaries that civilizations still considered human in proportion. Armies advanced physically across territory. Destruction required time, labor, distance, and sustained effort. Power remained tied to material process. On August 6, 1945, that relationship changed. In a single moment, an entire city was transformed by one weapon into fire, pressure, light, radiation, and absence. Hiroshima did not simply experience military defeat. It experienced a form of destruction that compressed what previously required armies and campaigns into seconds. What was unprecedented was the concentration of destructive power itself. For the first time, human beings demonstrated the ability to annihilate an urban center through a single technological act. The atomic bomb emerged from the convergence of forces that defined the modern 20th century. Industrial capacity, theoretical physics, bureaucratic organization, nationalism, total war, and scientific mobilization directed by the state. Hiroshima was not merely the result of one invention. It was the culmination of an entire civilization's capacity to organize knowledge into power. And once demonstrated, that power could not become unknown again. The significance of Hiroshima therefore extends beyond the Second World War itself. Before 1945, civilizations feared conquest, collapse, invasion, or revolution. After Hiroshima, humanity entered a condition in which it possessed the technical means to destroy itself entirely. A threshold had been crossed. What made the atomic bomb historically unique was not only its physical destructiveness, but the new logic it introduced into international life. Power was no longer measured solely by armies, territory, population, or industry. It became increasingly tied to the capacity for irreversible devastation. The possibility of absolute destruction became part of political calculation itself. The modern nuclear age begins not simply with a weapon, but with a realization. Human civilization had reached a point where scientific achievement and existential danger could emerge from the same process. This episode examines Hiroshima not only as a military event or the final act of the Second World War, but as a transformation in humanity's understanding of power, technology, and survival. Hiroshima emerged from a world already transformed by industrialized warfare. By 1945, the Second World War had become the largest and most destructive conflict in human history. Entire continents were consumed by mobilization. Economies had been reorganized around military production. Scientific research operated under state direction. Civilian populations increasingly existed within the logic of war itself. The distinction between battlefield and society had already begun to collapse long before the atomic bomb was used. Throughout the 19th century, industrialization gradually altered the scale at which states could organize violence. Railways accelerated mobilization. Factories expanded weapons production. Modern bureaucracy allowed governments to manage populations, resources, and armies with unprecedented efficiency. War ceased to be only the activity of professional soldiers. Entire societies became integrated into national conflict. The First World War revealed the consequences of this transformation. Mechanized artillery, machine guns, poison gas, and industrial logistics produced forms of mass death that earlier civilizations could scarcely have imagined. Yet even after 1918, many still believed modern warfare could remain limited through diplomacy, treaties, or balance between great powers. The Second World War shattered those assumptions. Across Europe and Asia, warfare increasingly targeted not only armies, but infrastructure, industry, transportation systems, and civilian morale. Cities became strategic objectives. Bombing campaigns expanded dramatically in both scale and intensity. Hamburg, Dresden, Tokyo, Coventry, Chongqing, and many other urban centers experienced destruction from the air on a level previously unimaginable. Technology was no longer merely supporting warfare. It was transforming conflict into a struggle between entire systems of production, organization, and endurance. At the same time, scientific advancement accelerated under conditions of existential conflict. Governments invested enormous resources into research capable of producing military advantage. Radar, cryptography, rocketry, aviation, and nuclear physics became deeply connected to state survival. The boundary between laboratory and battlefield narrowed rapidly. Within this environment, the atomic bomb did not appear as an isolated anomaly. It emerged from the internal logic of total war itself. The fear that Nazi Germany might develop nuclear weapons first intensified this process further. In 1939, physicists including Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard warned the United States government about the military potential of nuclear fission. What followed became the Manhattan Project, a vast scientific and industrial operation involving tens of thousands of workers, multiple secret facilities, and unprecedented state coordination. Never before had a state mobilized science, industry, bureaucracy, and secrecy on such a scale to weaponize the fundamental structure of matter itself. Knowledge increasingly became inseparable from power. Scientific discovery no longer remained confined to universities or intellectual life. States recognized that theoretical breakthroughs could alter geopolitical reality itself. By mid-1945, Germany had already surrendered, but the war in the Pacific continued with extraordinary intensity. Japanese cities suffered devastating conventional bombing campaigns. Okinawa demonstrated how catastrophic a direct invasion of Japan might become. American leadership feared massive casualties on both sides if the war continued through conventional means alone. Within this context, the atomic bomb was understood by its creators and political leaders not only as a weapon, but as a means to force historical finality. On the morning of August 6, 1945, Hiroshima remained largely intact compared to many other Japanese cities. While bombing campaigns had devastated urban centers across Japan for months, Hiroshima had experienced relatively limited destruction. The city continued to function as an important military and logistical center, but daily life still persisted within recognizable routines. Trains operated, workers moved through the streets, children attended school, shops opened. People prepared meals, crossed bridges, and began another summer morning beneath a clear sky. At 8:15 a.m., that ordinary reality ended. The American B-29 bomber Enola Gay released a uranium bomb known as Little Boy over the city. Roughly 43 seconds later, the weapon detonated approximately 600 meters above Hiroshima. What followed occurred with a speed that human perception itself struggled to comprehend. An immense flash of light erupted across the city, with temperatures at the center reaching levels comparable to the surface of the sun. Within moments, human bodies near the hypocenter were vaporized or burned beyond recognition. Buildings collapsed under the pressure wave. Fires ignited across enormous sections of the city almost simultaneously. Streets disappeared beneath smoke, debris, shattered glass, and flame. The destruction unfolded not as a gradual process, but as instantaneous transformation. Thousands died immediately. Many more suffered catastrophic injuries from burns, collapsing structures, and radiation exposure that remained poorly understood at the time. Survivors emerged into a landscape where familiar geography had ceased to exist. Entire districts had been flattened. Landmarks vanished beneath ash and fire. Human beings wandered through the ruins blinded, burned, disoriented, and searching for water, relatives, or escape. In the hours that followed, Hiroshima became increasingly difficult even to describe through ordinary language. Witnesses spoke of shadows burned permanently onto walls and streets, where bodies had absorbed the thermal flash. Rivers filled with injured civilians, seeking relief from unbearable burns. Fires merged into expanding firestorms that consumed what remained standing. Black rain carrying radioactive particles fell across parts of the city after the explosion. Yet the full meaning of what had occurred was not immediately understood, even by many political and military leaders. Cities had already been destroyed during the Second World War through conventional bombing. Tokyo alone had suffered devastation on an enormous scale earlier in 1945. But Hiroshima revealed something fundamentally different. The bomb compressed industrial warfare into one moment. This altered not only military strategy, but humanity's understanding of destruction itself. For scientists involved in the Manhattan Project, the bombing produced deeply conflicting reactions. Some viewed the weapon as necessary to end the war quickly and avoid an invasion of Japan. Others immediately recognized the possibility that humanity had entered a profoundly dangerous new era. J. Robert Oppenheimer later recalled a line from the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Whether interpreted literally, symbolically, or politically, the statement reflected a growing awareness that the atomic bomb represented more than military innovation. Humanity had unlocked a form of power whose implications extended beyond any single conflict. 3 days later, a second atomic bomb destroyed Nagasaki. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. The Second World War ended soon afterward, but Hiroshima did not remain confined to the past as merely the final stage of one war among many. Instead, it became the beginning of a new historical condition. After August 1945, every major political power would operate within the knowledge that civilization itself could become vulnerable to technologically accelerated annihilation. The significance of Hiroshima, therefore, lies not only in the destruction of one city, but in the threshold it revealed. Humanity had entered a world in which technological power had reached civilizational scale. The destruction of Hiroshima did not end with the surrender of Japan. It inaugurated a new global condition. In the years that followed, the atomic bomb rapidly transformed international politics, military strategy, and humanity's perception of the future itself. What had first appeared as a singular wartime event soon became the foundation of an entirely new balance of power. The United States initially possessed a temporary nuclear monopoly, but that monopoly did not last. In 1949, the Soviet Union successfully detonated its own atomic bomb. The nuclear age immediately became geopolitical rather than national. The possibility of atomic warfare expanded beyond a single state and into the structure of international rivalry itself. What followed was not merely an arms race in the traditional sense. It was a competition centered on humanity's growing capacity for self-destruction. Nuclear weapons evolved with extraordinary speed. The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were soon surpassed by thermonuclear weapons vastly more powerful than the devices used in 1945. Missile technology expanded the range and speed of delivery systems. Submarines, bombers, and intercontinental ballistic missiles created the possibility of near-instantaneous devastation across continents. For much of human history, geography provided civilizations with a degree of protection. Oceans, mountains, and distance imposed limits on the speed and scale of conflict. The nuclear age weakened those limits profoundly. At the same time, political strategy itself underwent transformation. Military victory could no longer be understood entirely through conquest or battlefield success. Nuclear powers increasingly operated within the logic of deterrence, the belief that catastrophic retaliation would prevent direct conflict between major states. Paradoxically, global stability became increasingly tied to the threat of mutual annihilation. This produced one of the most unsettling realities in modern history. Peace among nuclear powers often depended not on the absence of destructive capability, but on its permanent existence. Human civilization entered a condition in which survival became partially dependent on restraint, exercised under the shadow of unprecedented violence. The consequences extended beyond governments and military institutions. Nuclear anxiety reshaped culture, education, architecture, cinema, political thought, and everyday life throughout the second half of the 20th century. Generations grew up with the awareness that technological civilization possessed the capacity to end itself through decisions made within minutes. Hiroshima therefore became more than a historical event remembered through commemoration alone. It transformed the conditions under which humanity understood its own future. For most of history, political authority depended on limits that remained structurally unavoidable. Even the largest empires confronted restrictions imposed by distance, communication, logistics, geography, and time. States could conquer, dominate, or devastate enormous territories, but destruction still unfolded through processes that remained materially gradual. Human power, however immense, operated within boundaries that civilization could still conceptually contain. The atomic bomb altered that relationship fundamentally. For the first time, humanity possessed the capacity to destroy entire urban centers through an almost instantaneous technological act. Power no longer expanded merely through larger armies or wider territorial control. It expanded through the concentration of destructive capability into increasingly compressed moments of decision. Before Hiroshima, civilizations feared defeat, occupation, collapse, or decline. After Hiroshima, humanity confronted the possibility that political conflict itself might produce consequences so extreme that civilization as a whole could become vulnerable. The existence of nuclear weapons introduced a new category into human history: the possibility of technologically accelerated self-annihilation. That possibility reshaped political imagination even when nuclear weapons were not used. Throughout the Cold War, governments increasingly operated within calculations shaped by nuclear escalation. Crises such as Berlin and Cuba carried dangers that extended far beyond conventional military confrontation. For perhaps the first time in history, political leaders possessed the ability to trigger destruction on a scale capable of threatening not only states, but the broader continuity of organized human civilization. Humanity entered an era in which restraint became as historically important as force itself. This revealed a profound paradox at the center of the nuclear age. Technological progress had expanded human capability to extraordinary levels. Scientific advancement allowed civilizations to produce energy, communication systems, medicine, transportation, and industrial abundance on unprecedented scales. Yet the same processes also generated the capacity for catastrophe beyond historical precedent. During much of the modern era, technological development was often associated with optimism. Scientific advancement appeared closely connected to improvement, mastery over nature, rising prosperity, and expanding human possibility. The atomic bomb complicated that narrative profoundly. It demonstrated that scientific sophistication did not inherently produce moral restraint or political wisdom. A civilization could become extraordinarily advanced while simultaneously becoming more dangerous to itself. This tension remains central to modern history even beyond nuclear weapons alone. Human beings increasingly possess powers whose consequences exceed the emotional, ethical, and political systems originally developed to manage them. The speed of technological capability often advances faster than humanity's ability to adapt psychologically or institutionally to its implications. The atomic bomb forced civilizations to confront a question that remains unresolved even today. What happens when human power expands beyond humanity's capacity to control its long-term consequences safely? The nuclear age did not eliminate war, rivalry, fear, or political ambition, but it transformed the scale at which those forces could operate. Human conflict now unfolded beneath the permanent possibility of escalation toward civilizational catastrophe. Political decisions increasingly carried implications extending far beyond individual nations or generations. The significance of the atomic bomb lies not only in the devastation it produced in 1945, but in the realization that followed afterward. Humanity had entered a condition where its intelligence, creativity, and organizational capacity could no longer be separated from existential risk. Hiroshima continues to matter because the nuclear threshold has never disappeared. The weapons became more sophisticated, the delivery systems faster, and the geopolitical structures more complex, but the fundamental condition remains. The legacy of Hiroshima, therefore, belongs not only to the past, but to the continuing relationship between technological power and human responsibility. Humanity learned how to unlock immense destructive force. Whether humanity can permanently govern that force remains uncertain. Hiroshima remains one of the defining thresholds of modern history because its significance never fully ended with the Second World War. Many historical events eventually become distant from everyday consciousness. Empires collapse, borders change, generations disappear, and civilizations gradually reinterpret the past through new conditions. But Hiroshima continues to exist within the structure of the present itself. The nuclear age it inaugurated never truly vanished. The same civilization capable of extraordinary scientific creativity remains capable of organizing destruction at levels earlier societies could scarcely imagine. This tension has never entirely disappeared. Even during periods of relative global stability, the existence of nuclear weapons continues to shape international politics beneath the surface. The possibility of catastrophic escalation remains embedded within the modern world, whether visibly acknowledged or not. Hiroshima therefore persists not only as memory, but as condition. At the same time, the city also became associated with reconstruction, survival, and remembrance. Hiroshima was rebuilt. Its destruction did not become the end of human civilization, but the meaning of the event lies precisely in the awareness that such destruction had become possible at all. That awareness changed humanity's relationship with the future. For most of history, civilizations feared what nature, invasion, famine, or divine judgment might bring. After Hiroshima, humanity increasingly confronted dangers emerging from its own technological and political capacities. The greatest threats to civilization no longer appeared only external. They could also emerge from human systems themselves. Hiroshima marks the moment when humanity became conscious that its power had reached civilizational scale. The modern world continues to live within that realization, and beneath the achievements, progress, and complexity of technological civilization remains a question first revealed in August 1945. Whether humanity's capacity to create will ultimately remain stronger than its capacity to destroy.